Hello everyone and welcome back to a brand new F1 24 video. In today's video, as the title suggests, I'm going to be trying to edit the setup within the F1 24 game to make the setup and the car feeling as dynamic, intuitive, fluid as possible to increase the ability to enjoy the game while driving around, from both a casual perspective and a competitive perspective as well. Without doubt, I'm pretty sure that everyone watching this video, at least 99% of everyone watching this video, has seen a lot of the negativity and criticism of the F1 24 handling model over the social media over the last day and a half. And to be honest, I agree. There's so much scope for improvement, and it is rather a necessity to improve the handling model, both from a casual perspective and a competitive perspective as well going forward, for many reasons, but ultimately it has to be improved going forward, in my opinion. With that being said though, I don't want to be one of these people that are just saying criticism and saying some stuff over the social media without doing the work behind the scenes to try my best to improve it as well. So that is why I'm here today, and that is why I've done my homework today to try and improve the setup even before getting on this video, to try and make it as realistic as possible, to drive the car as fun as possible to drive the car, because ultimately the game series changed my life. I've been doing this game series for 14 years now, and it's given me so much stuff in my life. It's given me the ability to work in Formula 1. It's given me the ability to drive on a stage. It's given me the opportunity to do this video for you, because I probably would never have a YouTube channel if it wasn't for this game series. So everything being said, I'm very grateful to the game series, and I have so much passion to help the game series right now through this rough patch into a better future as well. So what is my theory? Ultimately, I think the theory is that the physics model actually has a lot of potential. I think the physics model as a baseline has a lot of untapped potential and has the ability to be really healthy and really positive for the game series as well. But where it is lacking, quite simply, in my opinion, is that the setup parameters are too soft and too low on the ride height and also on the suspension as well. That also with the front is very pointy, and it's very difficult to spin through the rear tires, as they seem to be having a lot of grip, but that's a very different problem. I'm going to be touching upon, let's say, the fun factor of the game and trying to get it a bit more enjoyable today, even at the cost of lap time. So jumping into the setup page, you can see this is the current world record setup around time trial on Silverstone. You can see 38.21, 40.40, 100, left, and ultimately 41.10, 87, 25, 50, 154 in the brake bias and maximum tire pressure. This is extremely similar to a setup that is on F1 23 and actually what I ran for the F1 23 Sim Racing World Championship. Ultimately, I've never really seen it before in F1 game cycles, that from one game to another that the setups stay relatively similar. Normally there's a meta for each game, we would call it. Ultimately a setup style that is just generally better than anything else, and that is normally what we sort of gravitate to, but so far on F1 23 there seems to be a very similar setup philosophy and setup numbers that go into the car. Ultimately, I do not believe this is correlating correctly with where the physics model should be in its correct operating window, and I think this is what's causing a lot of the, let's say, the inability to enjoy the game, because it really exposes the physics model for where its weaknesses are. So with that being said, we're going to now jump in using the time trial setup to do a lap here at Silverstone, and then I'm going to show you the setup that I've developed behind the scenes today that makes the game a lot more enjoyable, intuitive and fun to drive, and ultimately does a lot of stuff to actually fix a lot of the handling characteristic problems within the game. Not completely, but it goes a long way to fixing them anyway. So with that being said, right now this lap is going to be very similar to pretty much every lap you've already seen on F1 23, that the car is very snappy, oversteery, and does not have a lot of realism or, to be honest, that much enjoyment to it either. So now coming down the back, going down the start straight, you actually have to go in the middle of the track to avoid bumps on the outside, as quite simply the car is so low to be able to get lap time out of it in the corners that you have to run the car bottom out over the bumps in the straight, what means you have to take some weird lines and quite some wacky lines to avoid that happening as well. Of course, you can see the characteristic that the steering wheel is so pointy still ultimately as well, missing the bumps down the back straight through the left-hander. You can see just hitting the curb on the inside, but again, this lap is very similar to what you've probably already seen on F124, that it has these characteristics of very snappy front, very slidey rear, and a lot of just, like I say, this is a very standard lap for F124. Oh, the big snap. But now going through Mags and Beckett, you can see, once again, just a very high level of grip. That is ultimately, yeah, like I say, it's just a lap like you've seen a million times before on F124. But ultimately, as I get into the end of a lap, I'm going to show you some examples of what happens if you don't avoid the racing line on the straight and take the bumps that ultimately cause the car to bottom out, and you'll see that it loses quite a lot of time while doing so. Over the start-finish line, and now we're going to start taking the normal racing line. And now, yeah, you can see the car starts to bottom out, and we already lose a tenth before turn 1 because of the car bottoming out. Through the left-hander, there's no bumps through here, so that's all okay. And now the run down to Brooklands after this hairpin, you're going to see it happen once again, that the car will start to bottom out. The car is very sharp, very arcadey right now, and ultimately not that enjoyable to drive. See, now down the back straight, the car starts to bottom out, and we lose half a tenth, almost a full tenth down the back straight, just because those bumps at the end of the straight. You can see, just quickly jumping into the off-board camera of the car, you can see right now, just from the suspension, how bumpy the track is, how bumpy the car is and reacting to it. So again, as I touched upon earlier in this video, I believe the setup parameters are too soft, and ultimately the softness from the setup parameters are allowing the car into this unoptimized window of performance and making it very unenjoyable to drive. So what I've done is I'm going to keep the fuel load the same. The lap time really does not matter in this example. It's just about showing a setup that makes the car more enjoyable to drive. You have 38, 38, 40, 40, 0 on the engine braking, because the engine braking at the moment just acts like a handbrake and really makes this massive amount of rotation and instability generally on the entry, and makes the car like a drift car, to be honest. All the way left on the front camber, rear camber, front toe and rear toe, as I didn't really find any improvements for enjoyment while tuning them. Whereas you can see the setup page for the suspension is very interesting, and we ultimately have completely stiff front and rear suspension, completely stiff front and rear anti-roll bar, and completely stiff front and, well, completely maxed out front and rear ride height as well. And the reason for this is my theory was, okay, we can take so much curbing, we can take so many bumps on the road, we could take massive sausage curbs, and I thought, okay, the car is too low, hence why we was bottoming out on the straights, and we could take a ridiculous amount of curbing. The car is too low, and the car is too soft. So what I've done is completely maxed out the setup parameters within the game here to make the car as stiff as possible and as high as possible. And to be honest, you're going to see when we get on track, it fixes so many of the problems about the instability of the front or the sharpness of the front going into the corner. And although it still has quite a lot of these arcadey characteristics going through the corner, it completely gets rid of, like, let's say 90% of the bad feeling within the game, and we're pretty much just left with too much grip and slightly soft rear suspension still. So if I could, and then we'll say this and we'll get onto the lap and show you what I mean. If I could, I would effectively double the stiffness within the front suspension, the rear anti-roll bar, the front anti-roll bar, the rear suspension, make them double. Allow me to go up to 80 on the value. Allow me to go up to 40 on the values here for the front anti-roll bar. And I believe this will make the car feel so much better. And for the ride height, I would basically make the maximum value the minimal value within the game, and this will completely fix all the bottoming out down the straight and the instability and touching throughout the corner. We have to remember that this is not real life, this is a game, and ultimately, while pushing the game, we are always going to exploit as much as possible for lap time, and even if we are bottoming out in the corner, what makes an instability would not happen in real life, because you would not push that much in real life to the car, let's say. But in the game, you can get away with it, so of course we're going to push it. And you're going to see when we get on track, we also have the minimal tire pressure, but that's just to stop the tire overheating. As you can see, when we get on track, the car actually starts to feel so much better, and ultimately it's so much slower. It's like 1-2 seconds a lap slower, so it's not usable in a competitive environment, but it's a good direction that we can be going to try and make the car better in terms of the feeling. something that I think is extremely worth saying is ultimately it doesn't matter if it's 1.5, 2 seconds slower. Quite simply because ultimately if the setup parameter only allows you to do this, everyone has the same situation, everyone has the same setup page, which means even if it is 1.5, 2 seconds slower, everyone has the same tools at their disposal and makes it a lot better and intuitive to drive as well. Through turn 1 you can see already losing a lot of time. Hopefully this Ferrari gets out the way. It does, very nice. But you can see it still has the characteristics of a very pointy front end and the very arcadey sort of rear sliding, but even though we're 7 tenths down on the Delta right now, it feels so much better to drive. I can say this honestly, and as the AI actually getting quite nicely out of the way. Very nice. But you can see through the left-hander, this, I hope it translates to the video, but this feels so much more intuitive and better to drive. It doesn't feel so arcadey right now. There's still too much grip. That's undoubtable. Come on, Sergeant. Great. Cheers, Sergeant. Through Cobb's Corner. So there's still too much grip. There's still stuff to improve. But in terms of like an intuitive feeling, it's actually so much better. And I really hope it translates to the video. But it feels a lot better to drive. It doesn't feel over gripped too much. It doesn't feel like it's rolling. And ultimately, yeah, I believe this can be a good direction to go to ultimately be making the game a bit more enjoyable as well. So yeah, I really hope that people understand this video and can find this video useful. As you can see, we came across the line and it's 2 seconds slower, so it's completely unusable in a competitive environment. But to be honest, that competitive environment doesn't really matter, because yeah, to be honest, if everyone has the same setup parameters, then everyone will go 1.5, 2 seconds slower, and it will just be a fair game at that point. But I believe at the moment a lot of the problems is that the setup parameters are too soft, and this is meaning that we have a lot of ability to exploit the setup parameters to the maximum potential of that time rather than the maximum potential of enjoyment. So with all that being said, I really hope this video was useful. I hope that the setup improvement translated on screen as well, and hopefully we can get this game feeling as good as possible before the release coming up later this week, but if not, as soon as possible after the release as well. So yeah, like I say, stop, I need to talk. Yeah, I need to get my train of thought back. Yeah, hopefully this video could be helpful, hopefully it can be informative, hopefully it can make the game going a bit more positive and healthy direction. With all that being said, I've been Brendon Leigh, and I'll catch you in the next video. Grazie, ciao, ciao, bye bye.